Hi guys, today we are starting our sweet corn grow along, and we first of all need to consider the type that we're growing and how many we can grow at the same time. So sweet corn cross-pollinate very easily because they're wind pollinated. So what we do want to do is avoid growing two varieties that are sown at the same time. If however you do wish to stagger the sowing by 3 to 4 weeks, then you can usually avoid that issue. If you are growing a popcorn or flint type of sweet corn, then it is definitely worth sowing that one first so they have the maximum time in order to dry as much as they can on the canes. I'm growing two different varieties, but only one of these will I keep for myself. So I'm growing a variety called Swift, and these are both from Simply Seeds, and one called Marai Picnic. That's probably not how you pronounce it, but never mind. Sweet corn need a minimum germination temperature of 18 Celsius and above. So these are going to go onto my heat mat in the house. If you have a central heated house, then the chances are you'll be absolutely fine having them in a windowsill or something like that. If, however, you are going to try and germinate them in a polytunnel or a greenhouse, do be aware that mice are likely to try and nick your seeds. So it's worth hanging the baskets or putting them onto a shelf that the mice can't climb up, and that'll just give them a little bit of protection. These particular sweet corn are going to be planted after the first early potatoes have come out. So if you've been following along at roughly the same time, then if you want to do that, you also can. If you're growing them in pots, then we're looking at around a 4 by 3 inch pot, and this is ideal to not need to pot them up, hopefully. If you're growing them in soil blocks, then one this size, which is the mini 5 with the deeper dowel, is big enough, and they seem to do very well in there when I've tried, particularly last year. The reason that we can get away without such a deep pot when it comes to our soil blocks is first of all because the roots are air pruned, so it's not going to have that pot bound issue, and also because we are going to give them a feed earlier than we would in these. So these you don't tend to need to feed until they've been in the same compost for around 6 weeks. Some of the peat-free compost I'd say maybe once a little bit sooner. We need to sow a minimum of 9 in order to get a good pollination, because they are wind pollinated. That square format can allow the inside ones particularly to be pollinated very well. The more you're able to grow, the easier the pollination is likely to be, because it is the centre ones that particularly do well with the pollination. There is also the point of that I don't find that many pests cause an issue with them myself, except for later on when they're pretty much ready to harvest. I have mice that nibble the end of the silks, which is what we're waiting to turn brown, which gives us an indication that they're ready to harvest. However, a lot of gardeners do find that the mice and rats will come in, I think even badgers and foxes as well, will come in and completely eat the crop. So if you are on a allotment, it is worth speaking to others and seeing what their experience is, and whether or not it is something that you're going to need to worry about, and how they fence them in to avoid that damage. It can be something that's really difficult, and I'm sure puts a lot of people off of growing. So far, touch wood, mine have been okay, and it has just been the silks. Another thing to consider is when we think about the cross-pollination, when you're on an allotment or you have other gardeners that are gardening very close to you, or for my case in the field, if the farmer's growing maize, then that can also cross-pollinate and cause issues. So one of the things that it is worth doing is speaking to any allotment neighbours or neighbours that are growing, either finding out the variety that they're growing and growing the same one if you can and if you're comfortable to do so, or actually staggering your sowing in order to avoid that cross-pollination. I do not pre-soak any of my seeds because I find that it can encourage rotting. So if that is something that you've struggled with germination before, then pre-soaking might help, but I wouldn't do it for more than an hour just in case it causes issues the other way around. So into the soil blocks, all I'm going to do is drop one seed into each. And then using the end of a pen or something similar, I'm just going to make sure that they've got good contact within that soil block, and I'm going to slightly push a little bit of compost over just to make sure that they don't dry out. So that's what this tray looks like. When they start to germinate, what we'll start to see is like really thick pieces of grass poking up. As soon as we see that, it's time to take them off the heat mat and get them either back into the tunnel protected from the mice, or get them onto a bright windowsill to continue growing. And we're going to sow these ones into pots as you would be yourself. This is a multi-purpose compost that is not sieved. These are large enough seeds that I'm not worried about that. And I'm going to dib down about an inch. And I've got 3 seeds remaining, so we're just going to pop 1 in each. And then we're going to just cover them back up. These ones will get watered from the bottom, and I'll keep an eye on the weight of the pot. This is peat-free compost, so it often looks ridiculously dry on the top, but actually there's plenty of moisture in there, so just be careful of that. And while it is on any heat, you can find that actually that moisture can disappear quite quickly, so do keep an eye on them while we're waiting for them to germinate. I'm not going to put any humidity domes over these. You could do. I tend to find that I don't have a problem without them, particularly within the soil blocks, but then the soil blocks do keep a lot of the moisture in because you're starting with a very wet mix anyway. And then these are now going to go onto the heat mat in the house, and we'll have an update on how they look when they start to germinate and what we need to do when the time comes to plant them out.